Our democratic governments are not built on the proposition that the people are always right. Indeed, within the structure of our governments, there are safeguards against the whims or passions of the majority. But democratic government is built on the proposition that there resides in the common people an uncommon wisdom, that over the long run, the people and their right to political self-expression are the best protection against freedom's oldest and most powerful enemy, the unchecked growth and abuse of the power of the state. Now, this belief is not always easy to preserve, especially when the ship of state is buffeted by storms. There will always be those who lose faith and preach panic. You've sometimes heard their voices. But I believe that here in the nation of navigators, there is a respect for the wisdom of holding fast to the course that has been charted. We know there will always be answers if we trust in the people, if we go to them, give them the facts, and rely on them to make the right decision. In my own country, we've learned this lesson many times. No one had more right to question this belief than one of our great presidents and founders of my own political party, Abraham Lincoln. Even facing a civil war and powerful voices that told him the people could not be trusted with such momentous issues, Lincoln, with his typical backwoods wisdom, eloquently explained why, over the long run, democracy is the most pragmatic form of government. He said, and every American knows the words, you can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, as we do, that freedom works. This democratic experience and economic development go hand in hand. History shows a strong, unbreakable link between political freedom and economic growth, between democracy and social progress. And in our own time, a great revolution is underway in the world, a great longing for personal freedom and democratic self-rule that surfaces again and again, even in communist countries. At the start of this century, there were only a handful of democracies, but today, more than 50 countries, 1/3 of the world's population, are living under democratic rule. One of the agents of this, or engines of this progress, is the desire for economic development, the realization that it's free nations that prosper and free peoples who create better lives for themselves and their children. This realization is growing throughout the world, and in some nations it's causing conflict and disorder. In a sense, then, Marx was right. Economic progress is leading to clashes with old, entrenched political orders. But Marx was wrong about where all this would occur, for it is the democratic world that is flexible, vibrant, and growing, bringing its peoples higher and higher standards of living, even as freedom grows and deepens. It is in the collectivist world that economies stagnate, that technology is lagging, and that the people are oppressed and unhappy with their lives. So everywhere we turn, there is an uprising of mind and will against the old cliches of collectivism. Throughout the world, the old cries of power to the state are being replaced by cries of power to the people. Throughout the world, we can see movement toward a time when totalitarian rule and the terrible suffering that it causes is only a sad and distant memory. That's what you're doing, why what you're doing in your country is so important. First at the British Parliament in 1982, and then again in Strasbourg yesterday, we've called for concerted action, for a global campaign for freedom, an international strategy for democratic development. I can think of no more fitting place to renew that call to the world than here in Portugal. And I can think of no people better equipped to advance the cause of democratic development and human freedom than the Portuguese. Let Portugal again lead the world, and let the Portuguese again cross small seas and great ones, bearing news of science and discovery, the new science of democracy, the discovery of freedom, that it works, that it prospers, and that it endures. And I hasten to add that freedom can guarantee peace. Let us never forget that aggression and war are rarely the work of a nation's people, for it is the people who must bear the brunt and endure the worst of war. No, war and aggression in our century have almost always been the work of governments, one of the militarists and ideologues who may control them. And that's why war and aggression have a tiny constituency. Let democracy spread. Let the people's voice be heard, and the warmongers will be made outcasts and pariahs. Let us not be afraid that in our crusade for freedom to proclaim to the world that the cause of democratic government is also the cause of peace. This pursuit of peace has occupied much of our efforts on this journey and in our broader diplomatic efforts. Important negotiations are now underway in Geneva, negotiations that can lessen the chance of war by producing verifiable agreements and the first real reduction in nuclear weapons. So too, the United States is moving forward with technological research that we hope someday will lessen the chance of war by reducing dependence on a strategy based on threat of nuclear retaliation. I know you share my hopes that our efforts to reach negotiated solutions will succeed. And I know too that you understand working toward this goal means remaining strong in our alliance and in our resolve to protect our nation's freedom and independence. Our agreement on this point is why we can be hopeful that a century that has seen so much tragedy can also be a century of hope. In the United States and here in Portugal, in Europe and throughout the world, we have rediscovered the preciousness of freedom, its importance to the cause of peace, and to restoring to humanity the dignity to which it is entitled. This belief in human dignity suggests the final truth upon which democracy is based, a belief that human beings are not just another part of the material universe, not just mere bundles of atoms. We believe in another dimension, a spiritual side demand. We find a transcendent source for our claims to human freedom, our suggestion that inalienable rights come from one greater than ourselves. No one has done more to remind the world of the truth of human dignity, as well as the truth that peace and justice begins with each of us, than the special man who came to Portugal a few years ago after a terrible attempt on his life. He came here to Fatima, the site of your great religious shrine, to fulfill his special devotion to Mary, to plead for forgiveness and compassion among men, to pray for peace and the recognition of human dignity throughout the world. When I met Pope John Paul II a year ago in Alaska, I thanked him for his life and his apostolate. And I dared to suggest to them the example of men like himself and in the prayers of simple people everywhere, simple people like the children of Fatima. There resides more power than in all the great armies and statesmen of the world. This, too, is something the Portuguese can teach the world. For your nation's greatness, like that of any nation, is found in your people. It can be seen in their daily lives, in their communities and towns, and especially in those simple churches that dot your countryside and speak of a faith that justifies all of humanity's claims to dignity and to freedom. I would suggest to you that here is power. Here is the final realization of life's meaning and history's purpose. And here is the foundation for a revolutionary idea, the idea that human beings have a right to determine their own destiny. I hope you'll forgive me if I leave you with one story about our early days as a democracy. At a critical moment in our history, when disunity and discord prevailed on every side, a man celebrated as an inventor and scientist interrupted the proceedings of the Constitutional Convention trying at the time to formulate the Constitution of the United States. It was Benjamin Franklin who rose to say to his fellow delegates that he had lived a long time and that he had learned above all that not the smallest bird falls from the heavens without the knowledge of God. It is said that he then knelt and asked the delegates to kneel with him and seek a guidance greater than their own. And from then on, every constitutional meeting opened with prayer. A great democracy was born after those words, just as a great democracy was born in Portugal. It was born because the Portuguese are a people who love freedom and peace, who are willing to sacrifice for a better life for their children, but most of all, it was born because the Portuguese are unafraid to acknowledge a higher law that operates in the affairs of mankind. That higher law dictates human freedom and dignity. There is a word in your language I remember using in a speech during my first year in office, a very useful word evoking the remembrance of things past. I hope I get it right. Saudades. Daddies. Even in the short time Nancy and I have been with you in Portugal, we've developed a deeper appreciation for that word's meaning. We shall miss you, we shall miss Portugal, and we hope someday you'll permit us to return to visit with you again, and as you say, matar saudades. Until then, on behalf of the American people, we extend our warmest wishes. We look with hope toward your future and ours, a future we know will be one of democracy and freedom, one in which we also know the Portuguese people will write another great and inspiring chapter in history. Thank you, and God bless you all.